Story 1. The Scarred Man in the Ceiling Fan. I'm an architect now. I spend my days designing safe, logical spaces for people to live in. Maybe that's why I'm so obsessed with structure and perspective. But I think it really started when I was 7 years old, living in a drafty Victorian house in upstate New York. It started with the dreams. Most kids have nightmares about monsters under the bed, or being chased by wolves. My nightmares were different. They were clinical. It happened about once every few months. I would wake up in the dream, but I wasn't in my body. I was floating up near the ceiling fan, looking down at my own sleeping form. It was like watching a security camera feed. I could see my messy brown hair on the pillow, the rise and fall of my chest under the Ninja Turtles duvet. I was lucid enough to know I was dreaming, but I was paralyzed. I couldn't move, couldn't float down, couldn't wake myself up. I could only swivel my head to scan the room. And the room was always wrong. First, the digital clock on my nightstand. In reality, it was a standard red LED display. In the dream, the numbers were counting backwards, rapidly, like a countdown timer. Then, there were the drawings. In real life, my walls were covered in posters of space and dinosaurs. In the dream, those posters were gone. Instead, taped to the walls were dozens of crude crayon drawings on yellowed paper. They all depicted the same scene. A row of stick figures holding hands, standing in front of a blue house. One of the figures was small, me. But the figure holding my hand was tall, with a jagged red line drawn across its forehead. I had never drawn those pictures. I hated drawing. But the detail that unsettled me the most was the toy soldier. I had lost a specific metal toy soldier, a green paratrooper, when I was 5. I cried about it for weeks. In the dream, that soldier was always sitting in the center of the rug, perfectly upright, facing the window. And then, the climax of the dream would happen. I would feel a pull, an invisible force dragging my gaze toward the window. Outside, pressed against the glass, was a man. He was pale, with graying hair and deep-set eyes. But the most terrifying detail was the scar. A thick, jagged pink scar running from his left temple down to his eyebrow. He wouldn't scream. He wouldn't bang on the glass. He would just scratch. Scritch, scritch, scritch. His fingernails would drag down the pane, leaving greasy streaks. He looked desperate, like he was trying to pry the window open with his bare hands. That's when I would wake up, drenched in sweat, heart hammering. I told my parents, of course. My mom gave me the usual, "It's just an overactive imagination" speech. My dad checked the window locks and installed a nightlight. It helped for a while, but the dreams kept coming, like clockwork, every 3 months. Then, when I was 10, the pattern broke. I had the dream again. Same perspective from the ceiling fan, same backward clock, same crayon drawings. But this time, the window wasn't closed. It was open. Wide open. The curtains were billowing in a freezing wind, and the man wasn't outside scratching. He was inside. He was standing right next to my bed, looking down at my sleeping body. He wasn't moving. He was just breathing. I could see the condensation of his breath in the cold air. I tried to scream in the dream, but I had no mouth. I woke up screaming for real. My dad burst into the room with a baseball bat. I was hysterical, pointing at the window. It was closed and locked, just like always. But the room was freezing cold. That was the night everything changed. My dad didn't dismiss me. He looked at my mom, and I saw a look pass between them. It wasn't confusion. It was guilt. A week later, they sat me down at the kitchen table. "Son," my dad started, his voice heavy, "we need to tell you about someone. A man named Arthur." Arthur wasn't a stranger. He was my dad's older brother, my uncle. They told me that Arthur had lived with us when I was a baby. He adored me. He used to rock me to sleep, draw pictures with me, buy me toys. But Arthur was sick. He had severe schizophrenia, complicated by a traumatic brain injury he suffered in a car accident years before I was born. An accident that left him with a massive scar on his forehead. When I was 3, Arthur had an episode. He became convinced that the house was going to burn down and tried to save me by taking me out of my crib in the middle of the night and running into the woods. My dad caught him just in time. They had to institutionalize him. For my safety, they cut all contact. They erased him from my life, took down the photos, threw away his gifts. They wanted me to forget he ever existed. "But how?" I stammered. "How did I know about the scar? How did I know about the drawings?" My mom started crying. She went to the attic and brought down a dusty box. Inside were the crayon drawings Arthur had made with me when I was a toddler. Stick figures holding hands. A man with a red scar. And at the bottom of the box was my lost metal toy soldier. Arthur had apparently pocketed it the day he was taken away, thinking it would keep him safe. My dad explained his theory. The dreams were repressed memories, bubbling to the surface. My brain was trying to process the trauma of losing my favorite uncle, a man I loved but wasn't allowed to remember. It made sense. It was tragic, but it was logical. We visited Arthur's grave a few months later. He had died in the state hospital the same year my dreams started. After the truth came out, the dreams stopped. I slept peacefully for years, until last week. I'm 30 now. I live in a high-rise apartment in Chicago on the 42nd floor. I woke up in the middle of the night, paralyzed, looking down at myself from the ceiling. The clock was counting backwards. But this time, the window wasn't the focus. My gaze was pulled to the corner of the room. Standing there was the man with the scar. He looked sad. He pointed a shaking finger at my bedroom door. Then he mouthed one word. "Run." I woke up instantly. I wasn't dreaming. The smell of smoke was thick in the air. My apartment building was on fire. An electrical fire had started in the unit below mine. The alarms hadn't gone off yet. If I hadn't woken up right then, I would have died of smoke inhalation. I grabbed my cat and ran down 40 flights of stairs. As I stood on the street, watching the flames lick up the side of the building, I realized something. In my childhood dreams, Arthur was trying to open the window. He looked desperate. Maybe he wasn't trying to break in to hurt me. Maybe he was trying to get in to wake me up. Maybe he's still trying to save me. Story 2. The Loop of the Yellow Beam. I've only experienced a false awakening, a dream where you think you've woken up but haven't, once in my life. And honestly, that single night convinced me that our subconscious is picking up on things our conscious mind ignores. This happened last winter. I was house-sitting for my aunt in a creaky 3-story townhouse in Boston. She was in Florida for the month, so I had the place to myself. It's an old building in the historic district, beautiful but drafty, with floorboards that groan if you even look at them wrong. I was sleeping in the guest room on the second floor. It was a Friday night, dead quiet outside because of a snowstorm. I locked up, checked the windows, and went to bed around midnight. I don't remember drifting off, but I vividly remember waking up. In the dream, I jolted awake to the sound of the front door slamming shut downstairs. It echoed through the house like a gunshot. My heart started hammering. I sat up in bed, straining my ears. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy, wet boots stomping up the stairs. I wanted to move, to grab my phone, but I was paralyzed. All I could do was stare at the bedroom door. The hallway light was off, but a beam of light appeared in the gap underneath the door. It wasn't a normal flashlight beam. It was this sickly, pulsing yellow light. It spilled onto the rug, illuminating the dust motes. As the footsteps reached the landing outside my door, the voices started. It wasn't the intruders talking, it was a chorus. A dozen different whispers overlapping each other, coming from that strip of yellow light. They were saying the most vile, personal things. Things I had never written down. They whispered about my failure in med school. They mocked the way I broke up with my ex. They repeated a secret I had told my best friend 6 years ago in confidence. It felt like my own insecurities were being weaponized and broadcasted through a radio. In the dream, I finally broke the paralysis. I screamed, "Shut up!" and threw the covers off. I charged at the door and ripped it open, ready to fight. But there was no hallway, just a black, freezing void. The wind hit me, and I fell backward into the darkness. Then I woke up again. I gasped, sitting up in the same bed, in the same room. I touched my face. I felt the sweat. Okay, I thought. It was just a nightmare, just a loop. I rubbed my eyes, trying to slow my breathing. Then I heard it. Thump, thump, thump. The heavy boots on the stairs. The fear that washed over me was absolute. It was happening again. I looked at the bottom of the door. The sickly yellow light was there, pulsing. The voices started again, louder this time, screaming my secrets. "You're a fraud, Elena. Everyone knows." I squeezed my eyes shut, pinching my arm hard, screaming in my head, "Wake up! Wake up!" I felt a sharp pain in my arm. The room swirled, and I snapped my eyes open. I was awake, for real this time. The silence in the room was deafening. I was drenched in cold sweat, my heart rate probably pushing 160. I looked at the clock. 3:15 a.m. "Thank God," I whispered, reaching for my water bottle. I took a sip, trying to wash away the memory of those voices. I swung my legs over the side of the bed to go to the bathroom. Then I froze. I looked at the bedroom door. There, in the gap between the wood and the carpet, was a beam of light. A steady, yellow flashlight beam. It wasn't pulsing. It wasn't whispering. But it was there. And then, from the hallway, the real hallway, I heard the floorboards groan. Someone shifted their weight right outside my door. The realization hit me so hard I almost puked. The sound of the door slamming in my dream? That wasn't a dream. That was the real break-in happening. My brain had heard it while I was asleep and constructed a nightmare around it to wake me up. I didn't scream this time. I slid off the bed, silent as a ghost, and crawled into the closet. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers, burying the phone in a pile of sweaters to muffle my voice. I stayed in that closet for 10 minutes, watching that yellow beam of light flick back and forth under the bedroom door. The handle jiggled once, locked. Whoever was out there hesitated. I held my breath until my lungs burned. Then I heard sirens wailing in the distance. The yellow light disappeared instantly. I heard thundering footsteps running down the stairs, followed by the crash of the back door being kicked open. The police caught them 2 blocks away. It was 2 guys who had been hitting houses in the neighborhood during the storm. When the police searched the house, they found a muddy boot print right outside my bedroom door. They asked me how I knew they were there if I was asleep. I told them I heard a noise. I didn't tell them about the dream loop. But here's the thing that bothers me. The police showed me the evidence they confiscated from the guys. One of them had a heavy-duty yellow flashlight. But the voices, the secrets, the intruders were strangers. They didn't know me. So why did my brain use the sound of a real break-in to torture me with my own deepest fears? And why, when I look at the bottom of a door now, do I still expect to see that yellow light waiting for me? Story 3. The Trap in the Master Bath. I've always been what you call an associative dreamer. You know how if you fall asleep with the TV on, the dialogue starts bleeding into your dream narrative. That happens to me every single night. It's usually funny, but last month, it saved my life. I was staying the weekend at my friend Kyle's house in Connecticut. His parents were in Europe for the summer, so it was just me, Kyle, and our buddy Sam crashing in the living room. Kyle's house is massive. One of those old, drafty colonials with way too many rooms and hallways that feel like a maze in the dark. We fell asleep around 2 a.m. after a marathon gaming session. I passed out on the sectional sofa. Then came the dream. I was trapped in a submarine. I could hear the hull groaning under the pressure of the ocean. Suddenly, a pipe burst. Freezing cold seawater started spraying into the cabin with a deafening roar. The water was rising past my knees, then my waist. I was scrambling to spin a valve to shut it off, but it was stuck. The noise was overwhelming, a constant, aggressive hiss of rushing water. In the dream, the submarine captain grabbed my shoulder, shook me hard, and screamed right in my face. "It's not stopping! Wake up!" I jolted awake, gasping for air. The living room was dark and silent. Kyle and Sam were passed out, snoring softly. I rubbed my face, trying to shake off the panic of drowning, but the sound didn't stop. From somewhere upstairs, I could hear it. Shh. It was the distinct, steady sound of water running at full blast. My brain was still foggy. I thought maybe Kyle's parents had a timer on their sprinklers. But no. It sounded interior. It sounded like a shower, or a sink running full tilt. I sat there for a minute, debating whether to ignore it. Maybe a pipe burst? If I didn't check, the house would flood. I got up and walked to the foot of the stairs. The sound got louder. It was definitely coming from the master bathroom on the second floor. I started climbing the stairs, the old wood creaking under my socks. The hallway was pitch black. The door to the master suite was open, and I could see a faint light spilling out from the attached bathroom. I walked into the master bedroom. The rushing sound was deafening now. The bathroom door was ajar, just a crack. I could see the sink faucet was turned on all the way. water splashing aggressively against the porcelain. I reached for the door handle to push it open and turn it off, but my hand stopped about an inch from the brass knob. A cold wave of dread washed over me. It wasn't logic. It was pure animal instinct. The hair on my arms stood up. Why is the light on? Kyle's parents had been gone for 2 weeks. Kyle and Sam were downstairs. I hadn't been up here. And more importantly, who turns on a sink to rob a house? If a pipe had burst, the water would be irregular. This was controlled. Someone had turned the handle. I backed away. Slowly. I didn't turn my back to the door. I retreated into the hallway, then sprinted down the stairs. I shook Kyle awake. "Dude, wake up! Someone is upstairs!" "What?" he groaned. "The water is running in your parents' bathroom. The light is on. Someone is in there." That woke him up. He grabbed a heavy metal flashlight from the kitchen drawer, the kind that doubles as a baton, and we crept back up together. When we got to the master bedroom, the water was still running. Kyle didn't hesitate like I did. He kicked the bathroom door open and shouted, "Get the hell out!" I expected to see an empty room. Instead, a man lunged from behind the shower curtain. He was dressed in all black, wearing a ski mask. He didn't have a bag of loot. He was holding a tire iron. He swung it at Kyle's head. Kyle ducked just in time, and the iron smashed into the doorframe, taking a chunk out of the wood. "He's armed!" I screamed. Kyle, running on pure adrenaline, shined the high-beam flashlight directly into the guy's eyes, blinding him. The guy stumbled back, covering his face. Realizing he lost the element of surprise, he shoved past us, knocking me into the dresser, and bolted out of the room. We heard him thunder down the stairs and out the back door. By the time the police arrived, he was long gone. They found the back sliding door had been pried open with a crowbar. But here is the part that makes me sick. The police determined that nothing was stolen. Not the jewelry in the bedroom, not the electronics downstairs. The detective told us that turning on a faucet is a known tactic for home invaders with violent intent. They create a problem, a noise, a leak, to lure a single homeowner to a specific room, usually a bathroom or basement, where the acoustics mask the sound of a struggle. He wasn't trying to rob the place. He was waiting behind that shower curtain with a tire iron, listening to my footsteps approach the door. If I hadn't listened to that gut feeling and backed away, I would have walked into that small, tiled room, alone. And with the water running that loud, no one downstairs would have heard a thing.